Hey guys, it's Amanda from Sugar Cake School and welcome to this Lambeth Heart Vintage Cake tutorial. Now all of the details for the piping tips, supplementary tutorials and recipes can be found in the description box down below, so do check it out after this tutorial. Before you pipe onto your cake, I highly recommend that you practice your piping techniques, and I have a really handy piping practice guide. This is a PDF that you can print out, you can laminate it, or you can put it underneath a plastic sheet to practice your piping skills so that you can confidently pipe before you actually go ahead and do it on a real cake. And so without further ado, let's get into our Lambeth Vintage Heart Shape tutorial. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is to torte our cake. Here is my chocolate cake that I baked yesterday, and we're just going to be working on this cake. So the first thing we want to do is to take the top off. I run my sharp serrated knife along the top edge. Once I reach the first part of the edge that I started on, I just glide my knife through the cake and I get that whole top part off. You can keep this aside to make cake pops or just to eat. And then I'm going to use the same method, run my knife along the side. I try and make sure to keep the cake in 2 even layers, and then I glide my knife through. You want to do this for 2 different cakes. This is a 7-inch and a 7-inch round, and we're baked to about 2.5 inches high. And then we're going to turn this into our heart-shaped cake. And so I do this by using my sharp knife again, and I'm going to cut down, and we're just going to make a V at the bottom, so the pointy end of our heart, and then we're going to use those beautiful offcuts to form our heart shape. I've got my Swiss meringue buttercream here. All the recipe links are free and in the description box down below. I'm just going to pipe on the very top rounded side here, and I'm just going to apply one of those offcuts onto the left and onto the right. Now my cake is really nice and moist, and so I am able to bend it to form this heart shape, and it will stick using the Swiss meringue buttercream to the triangle pointy part of the heart at the bottom. Now we are going to do this 1 layer at a time, and we're going to stack this cake with all of our cake layers. And then we are going to fill this layer with more delicious Swiss meringue buttercream. Again, this delicious recipe is in the description box down below. I'm just palette knifing this on. You can pipe on a full layer as well. We just want 1 even layer all around this heart. I'm using a left, right, figure of 8 sort of motion when I'm spreading my buttercream around my cake layer. So I start with a big dollop of the buttercream right in the center, and then I use this motion to spread it right to the corners of the cake. I use the same technique whether I'm decorating a round cake, a heart cake, or a square cake. And then I just want to get it a little bit smoother, so I work inwards, pulling the palette knife towards the center of the cake. Next, we are going to move to our next layer. You want to line up the cake layers as well as you can so that your cake is being built up in really nice alignment. Remember to pipe on that little line of buttercream onto that rounded section of your main cake layer piece, and then you want to stick the offcuts, round it off, and try and press it into that rounded heart portion of the shape. You want to keep doing this until you get to the very top layer, and then you want to top it off with that final layer of cake. You want to choose the smoothest side to be the top of the cake, as this just gives you the best canvas that you can have to get that smooth section of buttercream on the top. Now this cake is 4 layers. That's because of the way that I baked my cakes in 2 separate tins, and then I cut it up and had 4 layers, but you can certainly bake a taller cake, just 1 cake in 1 cake tin, slice it into 3 portions and have a 3-layer cake if you do not want a cake that is so tall. Now I'm placing all of my additional buttercream on top. I'm just squeezing out the excess that I had in my piping bag. I also just want to add a little bit extra to the top, and we are going to do our crumb coat. Now, a crumb coat is a very thin layer of buttercream just to seal in the cake and all of the frosting, so that when we go to do our final layer of buttercream, we do not have lots of crumbs showing up in that final buttercream layer. So this crumb coat helps to seal in all of the crumbs. Again, it's a very, very thin layer. So I do a very thin layer on top and I try and just scrape it back down, and then I'm going to do the sides. So every time I'm icing a cake, I start from the top layer, I smooth down the top section of the cake, and then I apply buttercream on the sides. I'm using a flat bench scraper and I'm just pulling it inwards towards myself from the top of the heart all the way to the bottom, trying to get a smooth-ish surface on this crumb coat. Now with the crumb coat, you do not have to go really, really smooth. You do not have to spend too much time on this. The aim of the game is to really get it nice and thin, and just to make sure that every part of the cake is covered in a thin, even layer of buttercream. I'm just scraping off all of the excess on the very top, and then I'm going to go to my final layer of buttercream. This is Swiss meringue buttercream, again colored with pink food color. I used an oil-based food color, and I just put a few drops of pink in there to give me this really nice light baby pink. So again, I always start with the top. I put a generous amount of buttercream in the middle, and then I just spread it around to the sides. If you get little bits of crumb in there for any reason, just try and take that off. We want a really pristine buttercream for our outermost coat. Now, when you want to go to smooth down this layer of buttercream, you can see I always pull in towards myself and I scrape off any excess buttercream off my palette knife before going back in for a final scrape. This is really important to get that smooth top surface. Once the top is smooth, then I move on to my sides. I just try and cover the sides with a really nice thick layer of pink buttercream. Some people like to pipe the buttercream on using a piping bag and a nozzle. I prefer to palette knife it on. I find it much quicker. Now, I like to go quite thick with this layer because the next step is actually to scrape it off with our bench scraper, and we do that to get a smooth surface, and it's much easier to do if the buttercream layer is thick. You can see here I like to start at the bottom pointy end and also go in the opposite direction from the top pointy end. I'm using a flat acrylic scraper. One side has a sharp edge. I highly recommend this tool for getting smooth buttercream surfaces on your cakes. We are scraping back on that very thick layer of buttercream on the sides to reveal a really smooth surface. To do this really well, you want to hold your scraper 90 degrees to the cake board. You want to have steady, even motions, so use your turntable to do each turn. And you also want to scrape away the buttercream from your acrylic scraper every time you go back in to do a scrape. So in between every single scrape, you want to take off that excess buttercream and make sure that the scraper is relatively buttercream free when you go in for your next scrape. This is going to avoid buttercream from transferring back onto the cake. So this gives you a smoother surface quicker. If you have any holes or craters that doesn't have enough buttercream in it, just fill it up with more buttercream using your palette knife and then scrape back again using your flat acrylic scraper. Now we're going to remove that excess on the top. You can see there that there's a lip. I'm holding my offset spatula pretty much flat to the surface of the cake, and just on that edge I pull inwards and I scrape inwards so that it flattens out towards the center of the cake. Remember to scrape off any excess buttercream off your spatula before going in for another scrape, and this will give you a really lovely smooth surface on the top of the cake. When your cake is finished, place it in the fridge to chill for the next step. So now I'm going to be talking about the different categories of piping nozzles that you need to create virtually any Lambeth design. And I explained it in the form of categories so that you can look at your existing toolkit and adapt whatever nozzles you already have to create your design. And so first category is to have these small star tips. And so it doesn't really matter exactly how many tips it has, as long as it is a small size star tip. The other one that you want to have is a large star tip. Now this would form the main border of your Lambeth design. And so I've listed in the description box below all of the different types of nozzles that I use and the categories for which they belong so that you can refer to them. The third category is to have a petal tip or a leaf tip. And this is really great for creating lacy borders, those flat frilly ribbons. And so that's a great addition to the Lambeth design. The last category are these small round nozzles. These are great for dots and also creating those nicely fine piped lines. In addition, you can also have these couplers. Couplers are great for swapping out the nozzles for the same piping bag. It just means less washing up and less switching over of the buttercream and usage of piping bags. And so I hope you find this helpful as an understanding to knowing how to categorize and switch between different piping nozzles. So let's head into our decorating. So our cake has been chilling in the fridge, and now I'm going to work out the spacing for my swags. This is the border that I'm going to paste. So I'm just using a ruler and a toothpick, and I'm just marking out about 3 inches so that I have somewhat of an even spacing for all of my swags around the cake. Now this will be different depending on what size cake you are decorating. So just grab a ruler and try and work out what a good even spacing for your swags will work out to be. So the first thing that I'm doing is piping this border. I'm using a leaf tip. Now this leaf tip is typically used for piping leaves, for flower arrangements. I've got a deep pink buttercream that I've colored with Color Mill pink food coloring, oil-based food coloring. Oil-based food coloring is great for buttercream because it has such a high fat content. And as I am piping, I'm using a forwards backwards jerky movement, and this just gives it that extra frilly look. And as I do that motion, I'm also following the guides that I marked out with my toothpick and building a curve pattern. Next, I'm using my small round nozzle. I've got a very, very light peach here, and I'm just piping on these little borders, these little curves. If you make a mistake, just pull off that piping line and go again. I have a really fantastic piping practice sheet. It is a free resource to help you improve your muscle memory and the motor skills of piping, even if you've never picked up a piping bag before. Now I'm using my star nozzle here, and I'm just going in a rounded motion to pipe that bottom border. This is a 1M nozzle and makes a really beautiful thick border for the bottom of my cake. It's a great one to use for the base. Now I'm going to pipe on top of this, so do an over pipe. I'm just using a small 20 star nozzle. You want to use something smaller every time you pipe on top of something else. This just adds that other dimension to it. I'm using the same color that I used before as the lines, the thin lines that I did above. This piping pattern is often referred to as shells. So I'm doing little shells. So you squeeze with a lot of pressure and then you release the pressure and pull back. I should let you know that this video is sped up for the purpose of keeping this succinct for YouTube, but really doesn't always happen this quickly when you're piping in real time. So don't feel like you have to pipe this fast. Definitely take your time with it. So I'm doing shells again for the very top border with my lilac color. Now this is a very large multi-point star nozzle. It has number 195 on it. It is a Korean style piping nozzle. And again, I'm just squeezing with that full pressure and pulling back, and I just keep doing this and I pipe the whole border and get this beautiful motif all along the top edge. I'm doing a smaller shell pattern just on the inside of this with my peachy color. Then I'm going to add some sparkle to my fresh cherries. I'm just dipping my cherries in this edible, not just food safe, but edible glitter. You do not need glue or anything like that. You do not need syrup. It just sticks onto the cherry. It's wonderful. And so I'm going to pipe these rosettes using my 1M nozzle. You just start in the middle, squeeze and go around in this rounded pattern, and you get these beautiful rosettes. I'm just doing a few rosettes on the top, and then we're going to sit our cherries on top of this just to finish off our beautiful Lambeth design. You want to try and keep these rosettes quite evenly spaced all around the cake, and then press on your bedazzled cherries. You can use fresh cherries or you can use candied cherries. Our Lambeth cake is looking beautiful, so full of lovely piping and glam. If you want to take this one step further and include more personalization to your design, you can add some fondant cutout letters. I'm just rolling out a piece of colored fondant. I'm using my alphabet cutters and just popping it out using the back of a chopstick. This just helps to pop it out without shifting the shapes too much. Allow them to dry for a little bit as they're much easier to handle when they have set. And then you just want to place your fondant letters directly onto your cake. It will just adhere to the buttercream surface. To make sure that my letters are always evenly spaced, I always start with the center letters first. I don't start from the left to the right as we do in English. I start with the center letters. I work out which one that is, and then I work my way outwards. I'm just giving this one final puff of glitter, of edible glitter, and my cake is finished. I'm absolutely in love with this design. It can be adapted to any shape of cake. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please do drop me a like and a comment, and head on down to the description box for all of the mentioned recipes and supplementary materials. To stay up to date with all new Sugar Cakes videos and tutorials, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to turn on your notifications so you're not missing out on any new content. Catch you guys later!